before the revelation. Long before the deserts echoed with the call to prayer, before the name of Islam was spoken by human lips, the Arabian Peninsula was a land of tribes, honor, and endless sand. The sun ruled the skies without mercy. Days burned like fire, and nights fell cold and silent beneath oceans of stars. The desert was not empty, it was alive. Caravans crossed it like ships across a golden sea. Traders carried silk from the east, spices from India, and stories from distant lands. At the heart of Arabia stood a city carved into history, Mecca. Mecca was not the richest city in the world, nor the largest, but it held something more powerful than gold: faith. In the center of Mecca stood a cube-shaped structure made of ancient stone, the Kaaba. People came from every direction to visit it. Pilgrims walked for weeks across burning deserts just to stand before its walls. They circled it in reverence and prayed to their gods. But there was not just one god. There were many. Hundreds of idols filled the Kaaba, statues of stone and wood representing tribal gods. Every tribe had its protector. Every family had its beliefs. Some worshipped the sun. Some worshipped the moon. Some worshipped stones they believed held power. Others believed in spirits that lived in the desert winds. This time became known as the Age of Ignorance, Jahiliyyah. It was a time of pride and poetry, but also cruelty and division. Tribes fought endless wars for honor. A stolen camel could start a battle lasting generations. Blood demanded blood. Revenge never ended. The strong ruled. The weak suffered. Slaves had no rights. Orphans were forgotten. Women were often treated as property. Some fathers buried their newborn daughters in the desert sands, fearing poverty or shame. The world was dark. But darkness always makes way for light. And far beyond the deserts of Arabia, great empires ruled the earth. The Byzantine Empire controlled lands to the west. The Persian Empire ruled the east. Their armies were powerful. Their cities were vast. But Arabia remained different. It belonged to no empire. It was wild, independent, untamed. And it was here, in this harsh land, that history was about to change forever. A child is born. Around the year 570 CE, a child was born in Mecca. His name was Muhammad. No one knew that this quiet newborn would change the course of human history. His father had died before he was born. His mother cared for him with love, but fate was harsh. When Muhammad was only 6 years old, his mother died during a journey. The boy became an orphan. He was raised by his grandfather, a respected elder of Mecca. But only 2 years later, his grandfather died as well. Once again, the child was alone. He was taken in by his uncle Abu Talib, a merchant who treated him like a son. Muhammad grew up among traders and travelers. He saw the world beyond Mecca. He walked caravan routes across deserts and mountains. He learned honesty and patience. He listened more than he spoke. People began to notice something different about him. He never cheated in trade. He never lied. He never betrayed trust. While others chased wealth and power, Muhammad lived simply. The people of Mecca gave him a title, Al-Amin, the trustworthy. It was a name earned, not given. Even those who would later oppose him trusted his word. The man who sought truth. As Muhammad grew older, he became troubled by the world around him. He saw injustice everywhere. The poor were ignored. The powerful oppressed the weak. Idols filled the Kaaba, yet people still lived without peace. Something felt wrong. Deep inside, he believed there must be one true God, greater than all idols. A creator of the heavens and the earth. A God of justice. A God of mercy. Muhammad began to withdraw from the noise of Mecca. He sought silence. He sought truth. High above the city stood a mountain called Jabal al-Nur, the mountain of light. In that mountain was a small cave. The cave of Hira. Muhammad would climb the rocky path alone. Hour after hour. Night after night. He would sit in silence. Thinking. Praying. Watching the stars move across the sky. Wondering about the meaning of life. Wondering about God. He did not know that the answer was coming. And that the world would never be the same again. The night that changed everything. One night, when Muhammad was about 40 years old, he climbed to the cave of Hira as he had many times before. The desert was silent. The stars burned bright above him. Inside the cave, he sat alone. Then something happened. Something impossible. Something terrifying. A presence filled the cave. Muhammad felt it before he saw it. The air grew heavy. The silence broke. A voice spoke. Read. Muhammad trembled. I cannot read, he answered. The presence came closer. He felt himself held tightly. Again the command came. Read. I cannot read, he repeated. A third time the command came. Stronger. Unavoidable. Then the words were revealed. Read in the name of your Lord who created man from a clot. Read. And your Lord is most generous. Who taught by the pen. Taught man what he did not know. Muhammad's heart pounded. His body shook. He fled the cave and ran down the mountain into the night. He thought he might be losing his mind, or dying, or being attacked by something unseen. He reached home trembling. He called to his wife, "Cover me, cover me." She wrapped him in blankets until his fear calmed. Her name was Khadija. She listened as he told her everything. Every word, every detail. Instead of fear, she showed certainty. "You are honest and kind," she told him. "You help the poor. You care for the weak. God would never abandon a man like you." She became the first person to believe, the first Muslim, and the message had only just begun. The first believers. The night of revelation did not end Muhammad's fear. It began a journey filled with trials that would test the strength of his heart and the faith of those who followed him. After the terrifying encounter in the cave of Hira, Muhammad did not immediately begin preaching. Days passed, and he wondered what had truly happened. Had it been a dream, a vision, or something greater? Then the revelation came again. Clear, undeniable, a command. Arise and warn. Muhammad understood. He had been chosen, not as a king, not as a warrior, but as a messenger. He was to call people to worship one God, Allah, the creator of everything. No idols, no statues, no tribal gods. Only one, the first to believe. Muhammad did not begin with crowds. He began with those closest to him. The first believer was his wife Khadija, who never doubted him even for a moment. The second was a young boy living in his household, Ali, only about 10 years old. He listened to Muhammad's message and believed without hesitation. Then came his closest friend, Abu Bakr, a respected merchant known for his wisdom and calm nature. When Abu Bakr heard the message, he did not argue. He did not hesitate. He said simply, "If you say it is true, then it is true." His faith would later make him one of the greatest figures in Islamic history. Through Abu Bakr, others began to believe. Among them were Uthman ibn Affan, Zubair ibn al-Awwam, Talha ibn Ubaidullah, Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas. These men would later become pillars of the new faith. But in those early days, they were simply believers, small in number, but strong in conviction. Secret meetings. Islam did not spread loudly at first. It spread quietly. Whispers instead of speeches. Small gatherings instead of crowds. The believers met in secret to avoid the anger of Mecca's powerful leaders. They gathered in a modest house owned by a man named Al-Arqam. There, Muhammad taught them about God, about justice, about mercy, about the day of judgment. He spoke of a world where rich and poor stood equal before God, a world where slaves would be free, a world where kindness mattered more than tribal status. For many, these words felt like truth they had always known deep inside. But outside that small house, danger was growing. The message spreads. For 3 years, the message spread quietly. Then came a new command. Muhammad was told to speak openly, to warn everyone, to proclaim the truth publicly. One day, Muhammad climbed a hill near the Kaaba and called out to the people of Mecca. Tribes gathered below. Men looked up in curiosity. Muhammad spoke loudly. "If I told you an army was coming behind this mountain, would you believe me?" They answered, "Yes. We have never known you to lie." Then he said, "I warn you of a great punishment if you do not worship the one God." The crowd fell silent. Then came anger. His own uncle Abu Lahab shouted, "May you be ruined. Is this why you gathered us?" From that moment forward, opposition began. Why Mecca feared Islam? The leaders of Mecca did not fear Muhammad as a man. They feared his message. The Kaaba brought wealth to Mecca. Pilgrims came from all tribes to worship idols. Trade flourished because of religion. If people abandoned idols, Mecca might lose power and influence. Islam threatened their economy, their authority, their traditions, and their pride, so they decided to stop it. The persecution begins. At first, they mocked him. They called Muhammad a poet, a magician, a madman. They laughed at the believers. But when mockery failed, cruelty began. The weakest Muslims suffered the most. Slaves had no protection. One slave named Bilal was dragged into the desert. His master placed a heavy stone on his chest under the burning sun. "Reject Muhammad," they demanded. But Bilal repeated only one word. Ahad, Ahad, one, meaning one God. Even in pain, he refused to deny his faith. Another family, Yasser, Sumaya, and Ammar, were tortured for believing. Sumaya became the first martyr of Islam. She died without giving up her faith. The believers watched in sorrow, but their faith grew stronger. Abu Bakr's kindness. Abu Bakr could not bear to see the suffering. He used his wealth to free slaves who had accepted Islam. One of them was Bilal. He paid for Bilal's freedom and saved his life. Bilal would later become the first man to call Muslims to prayer. But at that time, he was simply a former slave with deep faith. Muhammad stands alone. The leaders of Mecca tried to make deals. They offered Muhammad wealth, power, leadership, marriage into noble families. They said, If you stop preaching, we will make you the richest man in Mecca. Muhammad answered calmly, even if they placed the sun in my right hand and the moon in my left, I would not abandon this message. They realized he would never stop. So the persecution grew worse. The believers were beaten, shunned, threatened. Families turned against families. Friends became enemies. Mecca was becoming dangerous for Muslims. Very dangerous. And soon, some believers would be forced to leave their homes forever. The migration, journey into destiny. The message of Islam continued to spread in Mecca, but with every new believer came greater danger. Years had passed since the first revelation in the cave of Hira. The number of Muslims was still small, but their faith had grown deep and unshakable. Yet Mecca had become a place of fear. Believers were watched, threatened, punished. Some were beaten in the streets. Others were cut off from their families. Trade with Muslims was forbidden. No one was allowed to sell to them or buy from them. It was a time of hunger and hardship. The leaders of Mecca hoped that suffering would destroy Islam before it could grow, but they underestimated faith. The boycott. The chiefs of Mecca made a harsh decision. They wrote an agreement and hung it inside the Kaaba. It declared that no one was allowed to trade with Muhammad's clan, marry into their families, speak with them, help them in any way. Muhammad and his supporters were forced into a narrow valley outside Mecca. The place became known as Shirbi Abu Talib. For nearly 3 years, they lived there. Food was scarce. Children cried from hunger. Sometimes they survived only on leaves and dry skins. At night, the sounds of starving children echoed through the valley. But Muhammad remained patient. He reminded them, relief comes after hardship. And eventually, the boycott ended when a few people in Mecca began to feel shame for what had been done. The agreement was destroyed. The Muslims returned to the city. But the trials were not over. In fact, they were about to become worse. The year of sorrow. Soon after the boycott ended, tragedy struck. First came the death of Muhammad's uncle Abu Talib, the man who had protected him since childhood. Abu Talib had never accepted Islam, but he defended Muhammad from the tribes of Mecca. Without him, Muhammad lost his greatest protector. Then came an even deeper loss. His beloved wife Khadijah died. She had supported him from the very beginning. She had comforted him on the night of the first revelation. She had believed when no one else did. Her death left a silence in his life that nothing could replace. This time became known as the Year of Sorrow. Muhammad felt more alone than ever before. And now the enemies of Islam saw their opportunity. Without Abu Talib's protection, Muhammad could be attacked freely. The insults became harsher, the threats more dangerous. Stones were thrown at him in the streets. Children mocked him. Men plotted against him. But still he continued his message. A city that listened. Muhammad began looking beyond Mecca for support. Every year, tribes visited the Kaaba for pilgrimage. Muhammad spoke to them one by one. Most rejected him. Some laughed. Some walked away. But then came a group from a distant city called Yathrib. Unlike the people of Mecca, they listened carefully. They had heard stories about a coming prophet from Jewish tribes living among them. They believed Muhammad might be that prophet. They returned the next year with more people. Then again the year after. Eventually, they made a promise. They would protect Muhammad. They would defend him as they defended their own families. They invited him to come live among them. That city would later be called Medina, the city of the prophet. History was turning. The order to leave. Muslims began leaving Mecca quietly. Families disappeared in the night. They left behind homes, businesses, possessions, everything. They left only for faith. This migration became known as the Hijra. It would later mark the beginning of the Islamic calendar. But Muhammad remained in Mecca, waiting, watching, trusting in God. The assassination plot. The leaders of Mecca realized what was happening. If Muhammad reached Medina safely, Islam would grow stronger. Too strong. So they made a final decision. Muhammad must die. Representatives from every tribe were chosen so that no single tribe would be blamed. One night, they surrounded Muhammad's house. Swords ready, waiting for dawn. They planned to strike together. But inside the house, Muhammad already knew. God had warned him. He told his cousin Ali to sleep in his bed that night. Ali agreed without fear. Muhammad slipped out into the darkness unnoticed. The assassins waited outside all night. They did not realize he was gone. The escape. Muhammad went to the house of his closest companion, Abu Bakr. The two men prepared quickly. They left Mecca silently before sunrise. Instead of heading directly north toward Medina, they traveled south to confuse their pursuers. They hid in a cave called Thor. Search parties spread across the desert, tracking footprints, searching valleys, looking everywhere. At one point, enemies came so close they stood at the very entrance of the cave. Abu Bakr whispered nervously, "If they look down, they will see us." Muhammad answered calmly, "Do not be afraid. God is with us." Legend tells that a spider spun a web across the cave entrance. A bird nested nearby. The pursuers saw the web and said, "No one could be inside. The web is unbroken." They turned away. Muhammad and Abu Bakr were safe. The journey through the desert. After 3 days, they left the cave and headed toward Medina. The journey was long and dangerous. The desert stretched endlessly. Heat during the day, cold at night. Every sound could mean danger. Every rider on the horizon could be an enemy. Rewards had been offered for Muhammad's capture. Many hunters searched for him, but none succeeded. After nearly 2 weeks of travel, they approached Medina. The people had been waiting. Every morning, they climbed hills to watch the horizon. Every evening, they returned disappointed. Until one day, a voice cried out, "They have come." The city erupted with joy. Men, women, and children rushed out to greet them. Songs filled the air. Muhammad entered Medina not as a fugitive, but as a leader. A new chapter had begun. Islam was no longer just a belief. It was becoming a nation. And soon, that nation would face its first great battle. The battles of faith. When Muhammad arrived in Medina, everything changed. For the first time, Muslims were free to practice their faith openly. No one beat them for praying. No one mocked them in the streets. No one forced them to hide. Medina became a place of hope. But peace did not last long. Far away in Mecca, the leaders of the Quraysh tribe were furious. They had driven Muhammad out, yet instead of disappearing, he had become stronger. Now he had followers, protection, a city, and influence. They feared what might come next. War was coming, building a new society. Before any battles began, Muhammad focused on building a community. He united people who had once been strangers. The migrants from Mecca, called the Muhajirin, had left everything behind. They owned nothing. Many had no homes. The people of Medina, called the Ansar, welcomed them. They shared their houses, their food, their land. Men who had never met before became like brothers. Some even divided their wealth in half. It was something Arabia had never seen. A society based not on tribe, but on faith. A new beginning. Muhammad ordered the construction of a simple mosque. It was built from mud bricks and palm tree trunks. The roof was made of leaves. The floor was sand. It was not grand or beautiful, but it became the heart of Medina. It was a place of prayer, a place of learning, a place where decisions were made, a place where the poor could find help. From this humble building, history would be shaped. The first call to prayer. As the Muslim community grew, a question arose. How should people be called to prayer? Some suggested bells like Christians. Others suggested horns like the Jews. But one man had a dream. In his dream, he heard words calling people to prayer. Muhammad approved the words. Bilal, the former slave who had suffered in Mecca, was chosen to recite them. His strong voice rose over Medina. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. God is greatest. People stopped what they were doing. They listened. The sound echoed through the streets. It was the first adhan, the Islamic call to prayer. A new way of life had begun. The road to battle. The leaders of Mecca prepared for war. Caravans of trade passed near Medina. Sometimes Muslims intercepted them. The tension grew. Finally, in the year 624 CE, a large caravan was returning from Syria. Muhammad planned to intercept it. But the caravan escaped and warned Mecca. Instead of merchants, an army came. Nearly 1,000 warriors marched toward Medina. The Muslims had only about 300 men. Many had no armor. Some shared swords. Others had only sticks or knives. It seemed impossible, but they marched anyway. They met near a place called Badr, the Battle of Badr. The night before the battle, Muhammad prayed for hours. He raised his hands and said, "If this small group is destroyed, no one will worship you on earth." Morning came. The two armies faced each other. 3 warriors from Mecca stepped forward to challenge the Muslims. 3 Muslims answered. Steel clashed. Dust rose. The battle began. Despite being outnumbered, the Muslims fought with determination. Fear turned into courage. Confusion spread among the Meccan army. Some said they saw warriors dressed in white riding unseen horses. Others said angels had joined the battle. By the end of the day, the Muslims had won. Many leaders of Mecca lay dead. It was a victory no one expected. News spread quickly across Arabia. Islam was no longer weak. It was becoming powerful. Revenge of Mecca. The defeat at Badr humiliated the leaders of Mecca. They swore revenge. 1 year later, they returned with a much larger army. Nearly 3,000 soldiers marched toward Medina. Muhammad prepared about 700 Muslims to defend the city. They met near a mountain called Ahad. Muhammad placed archers on a hill and gave a clear order. Do not leave your position, no matter what happens. The battle began. At first, the Muslims pushed the enemy back. Victory seemed near. But then some archers made a mistake. Seeing the enemy retreat, they left their posts to collect spoils. Suddenly, Meccan cavalry attacked from behind. The Muslim lines broke. Chaos spread. Many Muslims were killed. Muhammad himself was injured. Blood ran down his face. Rumors spread that he had died. Some Muslims fled. Others fought desperately. Eventually, the Meccan army withdrew. The Muslims had survived. But it was not victory. It was a painful lesson. Disobedience had consequences. Hard times. After Uhud, enemies began surrounding Medina. Some tribes prepared to attack. Others betrayed agreements. Danger came from every direction. But the greatest test was still ahead. An army larger than any before was forming. Thousands of warriors were gathering. Their goal was simple: destroy Medina, destroy Islam, and end Muhammad's mission forever. The Great Siege. After the Battle of Uhud, Medina lived under constant tension. Enemies surrounded the young Muslim community. Tribes that once remained neutral now began choosing sides. Some joined Mecca. Others watched and waited to see who would win. The leaders of Mecca knew one thing for certain: as long as Medina stood, Islam would survive. So they planned something bigger than ever before. Not just a raid, not just a battle, but a war that would end everything. The gathering of armies. Messengers traveled across Arabia. Tribes were invited to join the fight against Muhammad. Promises were made. Alliances formed. Warriors prepared weapons. By the year 627 CE, a massive army had gathered. Nearly 10,000 soldiers marched toward Medina. It was the largest force Arabia had ever seen. Against them stood only about 3,000 Muslims. No city walls protected Medina. No great army defended it. Defeat seemed certain. Fear spread through the city. Some whispered, "This is the end." But Muhammad remained calm. He gathered his companions and asked for advice. One man, named Salman al-Farsi, who had once lived in Persia, suggested something unusual, something Arabia had never seen before. He said, "Let us dig a trench." In Persia, trenches had been used to stop cavalry. Arab armies depended heavily on horses. If the horses could not cross, the army could not attack. Muhammad approved the plan immediately. Work began at once. Digging the trench. Men worked day and night. The ground was hard. Cold winds blew across the desert. Food was scarce. Some tied stones to their stomachs to reduce hunger. Even Muhammad worked with his own hands. He carried dirt. He broke rocks. He encouraged the workers. Sometimes they sang together to keep their spirits strong. During the digging, they struck a massive rock that no one could break. Muhammad took a hammer. He struck it once. A spark flashed. He said, "I see the palaces of Persia." He struck it again. Another spark. "I see the lands of Byzantium." He struck it a third time. The rock shattered. Many wondered how a starving community could one day reach such distant lands. But Muhammad spoke with certainty. The army arrives. Soon the enemy army reached Medina. Thousands of warriors spread across the horizon. Dust filled the sky. War drums echoed. They expected a quick victory. But when they reached Medina, they stopped. Before them lay a deep trench. Horses could not cross. Soldiers could not charge. It was something they had never seen. Confusion spread through the enemy ranks. The battle they expected could not begin. Instead, the city was surrounded. The siege had begun. Fear inside Medina. Weeks passed. Cold winds swept across the desert. Food grew scarce. The enemy waited outside. Inside Medina, fear grew. Some people began losing hope. The Quran would later describe that moment. Eyes grew wild and hearts reached the throats. Rumors spread. Some said the enemy would attack at night. Others feared betrayal from within the city. Every day felt like the last. Yet Muhammad remained calm. He encouraged patience. He reminded them that victory comes from God. Betrayal. The situation became even more dangerous. One of the Jewish tribes inside Medina, Banu Qurayza, broke their agreement with Muhammad. They considered joining the enemy. If they attacked from inside while the Meccan army attacked from outside, Medina would fall. The Muslims would be trapped. Destruction would be certain. Fear reached its peak. This was the darkest moment since Islam began. The storm. Then something unexpected happened. One night, a powerful wind began to blow. It grew stronger and stronger. Cold sandstorms swept across the desert. Enemy tents collapsed. Fires went out. Cooking pots overturned. Horses panicked. Sleep became impossible. The storm continued through the night. The allied tribes grew tired and frustrated. They had waited weeks without success. Supplies were running low. Morale was collapsing. Finally, the leaders made a decision. They would leave. Before sunrise, the massive army began to withdraw. The siege was over. Medina had survived. Without a great battle. Without a final attack. Against all odds. Turning point. After the siege, everything changed. For years, Muslims had defended themselves. Now, for the first time, their enemies understood something. Medina could not be destroyed easily. Islam was no longer fragile. It was becoming permanent. Muhammad told his companions, "Now we will go to them. They will not come to us." The balance of power had shifted. Soon, the Muslims would return to the city they had left behind, Mecca, and history would reach its greatest moment. The return to Mecca. Years had passed since Muhammad and his followers had left Mecca in the darkness of night. They had fled as refugees. They had left behind homes, families, and wealth. Some believed they would never see Mecca again, but destiny was leading them back. And this time, they would not return as the weak and persecuted. They would return stronger than ever before. The dream. One night in Medina, Muhammad had a powerful dream. He saw himself and his followers entering Mecca peacefully. They walked toward the Kaaba without fear. Some shaved their heads as pilgrims do. Others carried no weapons. It was a vision of peace, not war. Muhammad believed the dream was a message from God. He announced to his followers, "We are going to Mecca, not as fighters, but as pilgrims." About 1,400 Muslims prepared for the journey. They wore simple white clothing used for pilgrimage. They carried only light weapons for protection. They brought animals for sacrifice. They intended no battle, only worship. The road is blocked. When news reached Mecca, the leaders became alarmed. They did not trust Muhammad. They sent warriors to block the road. The Muslims stopped at a place called Hudaybiyah, just outside Mecca. Tension filled the air. No one knew what would happen. War seemed close, but Muhammad chose negotiation. Messengers went back and forth between the two sides. Finally, a treaty was written. It became known as the Treaty of Hudaybiyah. The treaty said, Muslims would return to Medina without entering Mecca that year. They could return the next year for pilgrimage. There would be peace between Mecca and Medina for 10 years. Tribes could choose which side to support. Many Muslims felt disappointed. They had come so far. They had hoped to see the Kaaba again. Some felt the treaty favored Mecca too much. Even Umar ibn al-Khattab questioned the decision. But Muhammad accepted the agreement calmly. He knew something others did not yet see. Peace would allow Islam to spread faster than war. And he was right. Islam spreads. During the time of peace, many people began accepting Islam. Without constant war, tribes could listen to the message freely. Trade routes opened. Travel became safe. Muslims spoke openly about their beliefs. Within 2 years, the number of Muslims grew more than ever before. Islam spread across Arabia. Even leaders who once opposed Muhammad began to reconsider. Among them were strong and respected men who would later become important Muslims. The tide of history was turning. The treaty is broken. Peace did not last. One tribe allied with Mecca attacked a tribe allied with Muhammad. People were killed. The treaty had been broken. The leaders of Mecca realized their mistake. They feared Muhammad's response. Some tried to repair the treaty, but it was too late. Muhammad began preparing an army. Not a small force, not a defensive group, but the largest Muslim army ever gathered. Nearly 10,000 soldiers marched toward Mecca, the same city that had once driven them out. Marched to Mecca. The army moved quietly across the desert. Muhammad ordered secrecy. He did not want bloodshed. He hoped Mecca would surrender peacefully. At night, thousands of campfires lit the desert. The flames stretched across the hills like a sea of stars on earth. A leader from Mecca named Abu Sufyan came to investigate. He saw the massive army. He realized resistance would be impossible. He accepted Islam and returned to Mecca with a message. Whoever stays in his house will be safe. Whoever enters the Kaaba will be safe. Whoever enters Abu Sufyan's house will be safe. Fear spread across the city. But there would be no massacre, no revenge, no destruction. The peaceful conquest. In the year 630 CE, Muhammad entered Mecca. He rode his camel quietly. His head was lowered in humility, not like a conqueror, not like a king, but like a servant of God. No celebration of victory, no pride, no revenge. Many who had once tortured Muslims stood silently watching. They expected punishment. Instead, Muhammad spoke words that shocked them. Go. You are free. He forgave his enemies. Men who had tried to kill him. Men who had beaten his followers. Men who had driven him from his home. They were forgiven. It was a victory of mercy. The Kaaba is cleansed. Muhammad entered the Kaaba. Inside stood hundreds of idols. Symbols of the old beliefs. One by one, they were removed. He recited, Truth has come, and falsehood has vanished. The idols fell. The Kaaba was purified. Once again it became a place dedicated to the worship of one God. Bilal climbed to the roof of the Kaaba. His voice rose into the sky. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. The call to prayer echoed across Mecca. The city that once rejected Islam had become its heart. Arabia changes. After the conquest of Mecca, tribes across Arabia accepted Islam. Some out of faith, some out of respect, some out of realization that the old ways were ending. Within a short time, most of Arabia had united. something never achieved before. But Muhammad knew his mission was nearly complete, and soon he would give his final message to the world. The final message. After the peaceful return to Mecca, Arabia began to change faster than ever before. Tribes that had once fought endless wars now stood side by side in prayer. The strong no longer ruled only by power. Justice began replacing revenge. Slaves gained dignity. Orphans found protection. The poor were no longer invisible. For the first time in generations, Arabia was becoming united. But Muhammad knew something that others did not. His mission on earth was nearing its end. The final pilgrimage. In the year 632 CE, Muhammad announced that he would perform the pilgrimage to Mecca. News spread across Arabia. Thousands prepared to join him. Men and women traveled across deserts and mountains to be there. More than 100,000 people gathered. It was the largest gathering Arabia had ever seen. They came to pray. They came to learn. But most of all, they came to listen. Because many sensed this might be the last time. The final sermon. Under the burning sun near Mount Arafat, Muhammad stood before the great crowd. The desert wind moved gently across the valley. Thousands stood in silence, waiting. Muhammad spoke slowly and clearly, so his words would be remembered. He said, "O people, listen carefully to my words, for I may not meet you again after this year." A deep silence filled the valley. Then he spoke of justice. He said that no person is above another. Not by tribe, not by race, not by wealth. All mankind is from Adam and Eve. An Arab has no superiority over a non-Arab, nor a non-Arab over an Arab. A white person has no superiority over a black person, nor a black person over a white person, except by righteousness. These words were revolutionary in a world built on tribal pride. A message of mercy. Muhammad reminded them to treat women with kindness. He reminded them to care for the poor, to protect orphans, to avoid injustice, to keep promises, to avoid oppression. He reminded them that life and property were sacred. He told them, "Hurt no one so that no one may hurt you." He warned against returning to the violence of the past. He reminded them that every action would be judged by God. The completed message. Near the end of the pilgrimage, a revelation came. It said, "Today I have perfected your religion for you, completed my favor upon you, and chosen Islam as your religion." Many understood what it meant. The mission was complete. The message had been delivered. Some companions began to cry. They sensed that the end was near. The final days. After returning to Medina, Muhammad became ill. At first, he continued to lead prayers. But the sickness grew stronger. His strength faded. Eventually, he asked Abu Bakr to lead the prayers in his place. The companions became worried. The man who had guided them for more than 20 years was weakening. The city grew quiet. People spoke in whispers. Every day they waited for news. The last moments. Muhammad spent his final days in the home of his wife Aisha. He prayed. He spoke softly. He reminded people to pray and to treat others well. One morning, he looked out at the Muslims praying together in the mosque. He smiled. Seeing them united brought him peace. Shortly after, he lay down. His final words were gentle prayers. Then, in the year 632 CE, Muhammad passed away. He was about 63 years old. The silence of Medina. When the news spread, Medina fell into silence. Many could not believe it. Some wept openly. Others sat in shock. Umar ibn al-Khattab stood and declared, "Muhammad has not died." He could not accept it. Then Abu Bakr spoke calmly. "Whoever worshipped Muhammad, Muhammad is dead. But whoever worships God, God lives forever." The truth settled over the people. Muhammad was gone, but his message remained. The legacy. When Muhammad began preaching, he stood almost alone. Only a few believed. Only a few listened. By the time of his death, Arabia was united. Islam had spread across the desert. The Kaaba had become a center of monotheism. The words revealed in the cave of Hira had changed history. Within decades, Islam would spread far beyond Arabia, across Persia, across Egypt, across North Africa, into Spain, into Central Asia, into lands Muhammad had never seen. Empires would rise. Cities would flourish. Scholars would preserve knowledge. Mosques would rise in lands far from the desert. And millions, then billions, would follow the message that began with one man alone in a cave. The light continues. The desert nights are still filled with stars. Caravans no longer cross Arabia like they once did. Empires have risen and fallen. Kingdoms have disappeared. But the call to prayer still echoes across the world. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. From small villages to great cities. From deserts to oceans. From east to west. The light that began in a silent cave continues to shine. And its story is still being written.